It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and with us back on the show is Father Augustine Wetta, here to talk about his new book. It's a novel called The Eighth Arrow. Thanks for being here, Father Augustine.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. I hope this all goes smoothly. I'm in between teaching high school classes, so at any moment, screaming teenagers may drown me out. If you hear a bell go off, just brace yourself.
You and the Beatles both had that issue.
These particular teenagers scream at me, not for me. So.
Okay. Got it. So your new book is kind of a mashup of the Odyssey and the Divine Comedy. Which do you like better out of those two?
Oh, that's hard to say. Well, okay, I guess I love Homer, and I guess I got to say I prefer Homer. And in fact, part of the reason I wrote this book was because I wanted to really deeply read the Divine Comedy, but I didn't have the self-discipline, so I decided, well, I'll just take Homer's characters and stick them inside Dante's Inferno and see what happens. And then I have to study Dante's Inferno in order to figure out what happens to the characters. So yeah, I guess I prefer Homer, but don't tell Dante.
Yeah. So is that really the inspiration for this book? Is you just wanted to read the book, so you decided to write a book to force you to read?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. The other part is that I have a very good friend named Philip Pullman who writes fantasy books for atheists. And he won a bunch of big awards. They made a movie, actually, out of his book called The Golden Compass. And he hates Christianity, but he's a brilliant writer. And while I was studying at Oxford, I hiked out to his house and wanted him to sign my book. Turned out his house is 3.5 miles away from Oxford, but it looked really close on the map. So by the time I got to his front door, I was a sweaty mess, and God knows what I looked like. But I rang the doorbell, and his wife answered the door, and she looked at me like I was crazy, which I guess I am. And she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm a big fan of your husband, and I was hoping he'd sign my book." And she shut the door, and there was some whispering. And then he opened the door. "How did you get here?" I said, "I walked. It's a kind of a pilgrimage, you know." And he said, "Well, come in." So anyway, we spent the afternoon drinking ice water and dandelion cordials and talking about his books. And the thing that I really love about his books is that they're set in the world of Milton's Paradise Lost. And it's just so unusual to come across a fantasy book with real substance. You know, even if it's written by an atheist, I still prefer that to the kind of vapid fantasy, you know, Olgar, the dwarf of the 7 hills of the crystal mountain of the sword of Blagnar. It's really just watered down Tolkien, you know. And so I said to him, this is just a brilliant book, and I love it in spite of your best efforts. And I said, you know, what you really should do is write a book set in Dante's Inferno. And he said, "I hate Dante. You write a book set in Dante's Inferno." So I spent the next 15 years writing that very book. And in fact, I dedicated the book to him in the introduction, or well, actually on the dedication page.
Yeah. Interesting. So you've been working on this book for 15 years?
Yeah, and it also kind of arose out of the classes that I teach, because I teach literature to 7th graders, and I always start them off with the Epic of Gilgamesh. Then we work our way up through Homer, and Milton, and Spencer, and Dante. And so the book itself works in little bits of all the books that we've read. So there are quotes from Edmund Spencer's Fairy Queen. There are quotes from Paradise Lost. In fact, in the very opening paragraph, I think 3 different classical works are all sort of woven together. He says, "Hell is there was nothing to see except a sort of visible darkness," which is a sort of twist on Milton's famous darkness visible. He says, "The fire in hell doesn't give you any vision. It just gives you more visible darkness," which is a really brilliant, just a fantastic twist of phrase. In fact, I'm now teaching a class on my book in the high school, and one of the kids finally looked up and he said, "You didn't write any of this, did you?" "Oh, yeah, it's mainly plagiarized from ancient literature." So it can be read as a kind of a puzzle or a guidebook to Dante's Inferno, or a guide to Homer's characters. But I was lucky enough early on to get a literary agent. He was Jewish, and so he didn't really catch any of the Dante allusions. And he kept me on task. He'd say, no, listen, if this isn't a good story, if it's just a class, then no one's going to read it. This has to be a good story. So there's nothing in there that doesn't contribute to the plot that isn't in itself exciting, I think, or I hope.
Yeah, but all these Easter eggs that you put throughout the book, what level of nerd do you have to be able to catch all of these?
To catch all of them, you have to be a first-rate nerd, really. But you don't have to catch any of it. I've got a glossary in the back and an index of quotes, and I did write it for 7th grade nerds. So,
okay.
But they're smart 7th grade nerds. So, like my other book, it's a book written for kids that I think adults are going to end up reading.
Yeah, the other book you're talking about is Humility Rules, which we had you on in episode 352. Still one of my all-time favorite episodes of the show. That book is so fun, and talking with you was really good too. But the book we're talking about today is The Eighth Arrow, Odysseus in the Underworld by Father Augustine Wetta. And why did you want to drop Odysseus in this story?
Well, I was just about to say that it's kind of a companion to the other book. And by the way, thank you for putting me on your show, because Humility Rules is now a #1 bestseller on Amazon. So,
there you go.
Yeah, if it were #2, it'd be better for my humility, but it's better for the book that it's #1.
And I'll take credit for that, and that'll take away from my humility.
I'm sure Kyle Hyman's show boosted my ratings.
That's right.
Immeasurably. But a couple of reasons. First, I just love the character of Odysseus. I mean, he is not a particularly good man. If you think back over his adventures, he hooks up with not one, but two goddesses on his way home. He kills innumerable innocent people and boasts about it. And when he introduces himself to newcomers, he says, "I'm a famous liar." So you can't trust anything he says. But at the same time, he's charming and he's curious. And in Dante's Inferno, he is one of the very few characters that Dante meets as he travels through hell who he actually likes and feels sorry for. And if I'm remembering correctly, I better go back and reread, but I think Odysseus says something like, "I don't really deserve to be here. I was just following the rules of the day." And Dante says to Virgil, "Well, why would God do this to him?" And Virgil sort of leans over and whispers, "Yeah, but he's a liar." So, don't take this too seriously. But in my own mind, as Dante leaves, Odysseus says, "Well, wait a second. There's a way out of here," and says a prayer to his patroness, who, in the Odyssey, his patroness is Athena, the goddess of wisdom, the seat of wisdom, they sometimes called her, or the Parthenos, or virgin. And so he prays to the virgin, the seat of wisdom, and she appears to him and gives him this way out. But Odysseus isn't the only innocent person that Dante put in hell. Saint Celestine was also stuck in hell by Dante and later canonized. So the conceit is that when I pitched the book to Ignatius Press, they were a little concerned about the theology of getting out of hell.
Yeah.
And so we had to include a little preface where Odysseus says, "Look, I was never in hell. I'm in heaven now, and I'm perfectly happy. But Dante put me in his fictional hell, so I'm gonna fiction my way right out of it."
It was fake hell.
Right. Well, it's fictional hell,
And so he's fake escaping from fake hell.
Fake hell. Yeah, exactly. And but though, if you think about it, the idea of visiting hell to begin with is absurd. So if Dante can make that kind of a mistake, I figure I can be excused as well. I even put a couple of living people in hell, but I won't tell you who they are because I don't want to get sued.
Okay.
But Dante did it too. So anything Dante does, I feel I have license for.
So how much harder was it to put characters from one story in a scene of another story instead of just creating your own fictional characters and putting them in your own fictional story?
Actually, I think it was easier.
Really?
I don't have to come up with a new personality. There goes the school bell. So anything could happen. Well, I mean, I didn't have to go through the trouble of creating my own characters. There's a lot of myself, I guess, in both Diomedes and his best friend, Odysseus and his best friend Diomedes. But trying to make someone up from scratch is a lot more difficult than using someone else's characters, in my opinion. So the story kind of wrote itself. So it doesn't feel difficult to me. People keep saying, "Oh, this is something new, something nobody's ever tried," but really, that's what Tolkien did. The mythopoeia, right? Taking pieces of other people's myths and weaving them into a myth of your own, which I miss in modern fantasy. There are a couple of great books out there. There's the Bartimaeus trilogy. There's Tolkien. There's C.S. Lewis. And then there's Pullman. But I don't recommend Pullman to people who maybe don't have the theology to refute his atheism.
Okay.
But he's a super nice guy.
Yeah, he gave you water and some dandelion stuff.
Yeah, and he and I have been in touch ever since. We go back and forth over correspondence, and whenever I'm at Oxford, we have lunch or dinner together and debate Christianity.
Yeah. What do you hope that people that read the book get out of it?
Oh, man. Well, I hope that it's just fun, firstly. If it's not a good story, then it wouldn't be worth reading at all. So I hope it's fun. I had a friend who's an artist who said nothing can kill a work of art like an idea. So it's not propaganda exactly. But as Odysseus works his way through the Inferno, he has to become a better person, right? A better and better. Otherwise, he'd never get out. So I hope that people will become better. Spoiler alert, the 7 arrows are the 7 virtues. And so he has to use each virtue to get further and further out of hell. The 8th arrow I'll leave as a mystery. He has to discover that before he leaves. So I hope it'll build virtue in kids, but I hope it'll also entertain them. And, that's about it, I think. And I hope they learn a lot about Dante and Homer and actually start looking at the original text.
Yeah.
And working their way through that. Because they really are the greatest stories ever. And the Iliad I actually prefer to the Odyssey, but that's a whole other interview, I think.
Well, when this gets made into a movie, who would you like to play the characters?
Oh, who's the guy who just got hurt on a motor scooter in Italy? What's his name? He played a doctor my students are here. Who's the guy who played the doctor? He was in a movie shot in St. Louis. Older guy. Who? Oh, anyway. Shoot. He actually played Ulysses in a movie called Brother, Where Art Thou? George Clooney. George Clooney.
Yeah.
I would say George Clooney as Odysseus, and I would have Brad Pitt as Diomedes.
So it's basically Ocean's 2.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine who wrote a book called Ashfall, which was a bestseller, young adult literature, he said it's a buddy cop movie set in Dante's. So, it is kind of Ocean's 2.
Okay.
So, maybe Ocean's 4, because a couple of other ancient Greek heroes show up along the way and join their groups. Then there's the mother of all battles at the end, so it's sort of Ocean's 2 meets Saving Private Ryan meets Lord of the Rings. I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Well, I will be first in line at the ticket office for it. Can't wait.
All my students want to say hello. They're here, and they've been extremely nice. So everybody say hello to Kyle Hyman and his audience. Very nice. The little angels is what they are.
Yeah, I bet. All right. Well, the book is available through Ignatius Press, also Amazon, and wherever you get books. Again, it's called The 8th Arrow. Father Augustine Wetta, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this with us. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. Anytime. It's always fun to call over there. So just next time you're bored, give me another call.
All right. Sounds good.
And read the book. Or both.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Father.